Well, here's the good part. She's going to be releasing music after a really...
See you all, and really awesome to be here in Christchurch and to be opening up the cargo freight apron this morning at the airport was brilliant, and to see an amazing asset like that that's going to get more product as a gateway through Christchurch out into the world, very, very special. So, but with that, happy to take your questions.
Hey, just starting on infrastructure. So the Finance Minister was down here a couple of weeks ago and said no one's asked here for all the government for any one infrastructure project in Canterbury. What would you like to see Canterbury?
Well, we've actually got a lot of investment going on in Canterbury, as you know, State Highway 76, even in broader Canterbury we're going, with the Ashburton Bridge, there's a lot of infrastructure that's been built into the city and continues to be built into the city. Again, for us what we need to do is, a big focus is on the roads of national significance. We know that enables a lot of growth and a lot of productivity. There's a lot of them. It's a big vision that we've got to lay out there, and we'll work our way through that in due course.
Just one big project, what would you like to see?
I think we do that in consult with local government and with the people here in the region as to what they think would make the biggest difference. But again, it's about how we fund and finance all of that and how we get those projects done. Yes, hey. Look, I think as a policy, it's a little bit flawed that, do people like me and Chris Hipkins really need free prescriptions? And it's not as targeted as it needs to be. In our case, we target it for community card folk, gold card folk, and obviously children. I think the better response would be for the Labour Party to come on board with our policy, which is actually about extending prescription lengths, because that actually frees up appointments in GPs and importantly saves people on average about $105 a year. So, I just don't think it's sufficiently targeted enough. Well, again, our issue, as we've talked about, is there's $21 billion worth of spending that's been proposed by the Labour Party, and yet only the capital gains tax rate is, I think, $2.8 billion that they've got proposed, and there's an $18 billion shortfall or gap, and it's up for them to tell us as to how they think they'll fund that, given the challenging financial situation that we're in.
What's your reaction to Shane Burns' travel cost blowout? Do you support an independent review of parliamentary pay and allowances?
Well, on the first point, I expect ministers to work within the budgets that they're given. In this case, it genuinely was an administrative error. Shane has spoken to that this morning. I expect it won't happen again. On the other point, I've said earlier in the week that the system that has been built up over multiple decades. It's incredibly complex. I don't think having politicians involved in setting pay terms and conditions is the right way. We've seen that as a past in New Zealand, and actually it's better handled by an independent remuneration authority and keep the politicians out of it. Having said that, I've asked for some particular advice on understanding some of the past payments and how that has all worked and how we've got to where we've got to.
If this was an administration,
if
this was an administration, do you believe that $63,000 on a 5-day trip is some money to spend?
Well, again, there's a proposal put forward in a budget that's requested for the travel. It's discussed in cabinet. Those travel requests come through. My expectation is ministers work within the confines of their budgets. In this case, there was an administrative error. And as I said, Shane's spoken to it, and I don't expect that to happen again.
$54,000 on just flights with 4 nights accommodation for 2 people. You think that is quite reasonable? Is that showing fiscal restraint?
Well, again, depending upon the nature of the engagements, what's happening on those programs, that's considered in the initial project when a budget is actually pitched. That's how it's happened under successive governments. It happens under our government as well, is that every minister, when they travel, has to put forward a proposal, and then we accept that proposal or we refine that proposal based off the scope of the work that they're doing while they're away.
What's your thoughts on Jerry Brownlee proposing vacating the V-time for 18 months so it can renovate?
Yeah, look, honestly, that's a decision for the Speaker who's responsible for the Parliament. That's not something that's in my domain.
These are questions for Jason Mills on the GDP. Are you pleased to see New Zealand's economy grow so strongly in the first quarter of the year?
Yeah, we are, and obviously you saw the previous quarter restated to 0.5%. It's 0.8% in this last quarter. It just underscores that we had good economic momentum going into the fuel crisis. Obviously the fuel crisis will have some impact on inflation and also on growth, but that's why we've tried to be really responsible economic managers to make sure that as we get through the crisis we can pop out the other side and continue to accelerate growth.
So are you expecting a downturn in the second half?
There'll be some impact in the second quarter, but ultimately, as you saw through our budget, even through the crisis, we're expected to grow the economy 2.7% over the next 4 years on average. That's higher than the EU, it's higher than Australia, Japan, many other countries. We're expected to create 220,000 new jobs, and most importantly, actually wages are growing up faster than prices, and that means that Kiwis can get ahead.
Are you upset,
Sorry, no, you carry on.
that Donald Trump and his war seem to have disrupted New Zealand's growth?
Well, I think it's caused huge pain and suffering for people all around the world, and particularly here in New Zealand as well. I spoke to a number of developing country leaders as well over the last few months in my regular meetings and talks with POC, and some of them even doing it much tougher than us here in New Zealand. I think we as a government have worked well with industry to manage and to minimise the impacts as best we possibly can. It's been good to see fuel prices come down from the highs they were 5 weeks ago. Obviously, it's a very fragile situation. We really want the parties, both the US and Iran, to use this time to actually get an enduring, sustainable, long-term peace in place, and so hostilities don't break out again. We as a government have prepared, putting money aside in case the conflict is extended. We really hope the parties take the opportunity to remove a lot of pain and suffering for people in New Zealand, but also around the world.
Can you understand why the public is upset by spending such as that demonstrated by Minister Jones, considering the rhetoric around fiscal restraint and cutting waste?
Well, again, as I said to you, on this particular circumstances, I've explained that. I've got nothing further to say. Shane's talked to that this morning. I've said to you, I expect ministers to work within their budgets. In this case, there was an administrative error. I don't expect it to happen again.
Take that saying you believe that a $50,000 budget on accommodation and flights is an appropriate one.
Well, as I said to you, every minister with respect to overseas travel has to put a proposal together and a budget together. That is then approved based off the scope of the work that they have while they're doing their overseas piece. In this case, there was genuinely an administrative error. I expect it not to happen again.
Prime Minister,
Yes.
This is slightly tricky one, so I'm going to have to read it. So the Maritime Union has just released a statement saying that DP World has procured an unsolicited takeover and operational lease proposal from the Wellington Port. Are you concerned that a foreign national could be taking operational control of such a strategic?
I haven't seen those reports, so I don't really want to comment on that at this point in time. Do I, in general, across the whole of the New Zealand economy, do I think domestic investment JVs with domestic capital, also partnership with international capital is a good thing? Yes, I do. I've seen really good examples where we've had the active investor visa class opened up. We've had almost $4 billion come into the country, and right here in Christchurch I've been at businesses where that money has enabled those businesses to grow, and that know-how has been shared between Kiwis and overseas folk, putting capital together, but more importantly knowledge and know-how as well, and there's some pretty exciting startups that happen on the back of that. So we do need foreign international investment. It's important. We've got haven't got a lot of capital in this country, and it's one of the ways that we do that, but we also have growing pools of KiwiSaver funds, and that's another way we can grow as well.
Just on the sale of public land,
Yeah.
Forest and Bird have got polling coming out next week that shows New Zealanders overwhelmingly oppose the sale of conservation land, which includes overwhelming opposition from traditional national voters. How do you feel about that?
I think there's been a lot of scaremongering about that Conservation Amendment Bill. There genuinely are huge checks and balances in that before any sale or disposal of land is considered, and it's in the context of just things that doesn't make sense for the Department of Conservation to hold, but there are checks and balances in that. So I just encourage people, we're in a select committee process. Now is exactly the reason we do this, is that we have a first reading for a bill. There is an engagement with the public and many of the stakeholders, and we encourage them to present, and then we have a second reading to improve the bill and the legislation, and then a third go before it becomes law. So there's a wee way to go. Encourage people to submit, but I just want to also put it in context that I think there's a bit of scaremongering going on there.
Minister Jones,
Last couple, guys.
the fisheries amendment bill won't pass in this term. Does that mean that bill is effectively dead?
Well, as I said, National supported the bill at first reading. We had serious concerns about it. We opened it up to a select committee process. I think we've had a lot of feedback from a range of people about that. I think it's the appropriate decision to defer the bill and to take more consultation and more feedback before it progresses.
Will you look to pass a version of it if you're re-elected in government?
Well, I think it's about making sure we understand the feedback that we received in the steering in the select committee, and importantly, we take that on board and really understand the technicalities of that bill before it goes any further. Yeah.
One last
Sorry.
question. News today that Dargaville will no longer have hospital and instead have a user pays outcome. Is this a sign of things to come in other rural areas? How committed is your government to providing timely medical care to these communities?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, we've put a lot of extra money into healthcare. Importantly, we've put more staff into healthcare. We have 2,100 more nurses than we had 2 years ago. We have 600 extra doctors. Our real challenge is getting it into regional New Zealand, that support and those services, as well as obviously into some specialist areas as well. We're putting a lot of investment in. We're opening up a third medical school at Waikato, which is designed deliberately to actually get people out into rural communities. That's where they'll do their placements. That's where we hope that they'll actually take those jobs and those roles ultimately as well. But we're in a country of the same size as Great Britain or Japan with 5 million people. It's difficult getting those services, I appreciate, out into to regional rural New Zealand. But we are thinking creatively about different models of care. The work that we've been doing to accelerate DigiHealth, for example, where you can do a consult, digitally. The work that we're doing to make sure that we are, nurse practitioners and can now prescribe and do many of the functions that GPs can, as they do around the world, is actually really important. So, so I think we're proud of the work that we've put in terms of the money. We've put a lot more resources in. We're clear on the targets that we expect, but we are also going to have to innovate on getting models of care across New Zealand, and that's what we're doing as well. All right, thanks team, appreciate it. Have a good day. All right, thanks for your time.